Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the online workshop today with Aaron Marcus. This workshop is titled An Actor and Model Guide to New York City. Let me introduce Aaron Marcus. Aaron is America's premier acting and commercial modeling career coach. He's also the top-selling author and founder of HowToModel.com, one of Google's top-ranked acting and modeling career sites. Aaron has been cast as Dr. Stephen Leopold on NBC's show Do No Harm. He had a scene with Judi Dench in her new film, Philomena. He worked in Atlanta on the feature film Almanac and in two independent films, Eugene and A Modest Suggestion. He's been a full-time actor and commercial model for over 27 years. To date, he's been cast 1,201 times. You've seen Aaron in projects such as Burn After Reading, Law and Order: Criminal Intent, The West Wing, Crybaby, America's Most Wanted, Molson Beer, McDonald's, Kmart, A Modest Suggestion, HBO's The Wire, and Disney World. Aaron has also appeared in print ads throughout the United States, Europe, the Netherlands, and Asia. He has written what many consider the most important book for commercial modeling, entitled How to Become a Successful Commercial Model, and it's now in its 5th edition. He writes and publishes the Tear Sheet newsletter, a quarterly commercial modeling and acting newsletter, has given over 500 workshops in 4 countries, and also offers monthly online workshops for actors and models, as well as private one-on-one online coaching sessions. Aaron, we're excited you're our host today, and we're really excited to get the workshop started.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Joel. And I'm really excited. We've got Ron Bush here, who's a very talented actor living in New York City. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Aaron.
And just so that everybody here knows, Ron wrote an incredible book. It is called 101 Business Tips for Actors. And he also founded the New York Entertainment Group, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, because it's an amazing group for actors. And Ron also is a very successful actor living in New York. If you have any questions at all, and I'll mention this at the end, also he's got a website. It is marketingforactors.com. So, Ron, I'd like to get started by asking you this. There are so many people who have thought about, moving to New York, which, certainly it's the center for theater. There's a tremendous amount of commercial modeling work. There are films, television shows being shot in New York, and like everybody knows about New York. But, it's a difficult place to maneuver, especially if you really don't know what you're doing. So, you came from a smaller market, and I know you've been in New York, you had mentioned, for 3 years now. So, first of all, what made you decide to move to a major market?
Well, I was actually living in Baltimore. And living in Baltimore, New York is only a 2-hour bus ride away. So I was coming up here more and more for auditions. And it got to the point where I was coming up here so often that I was probably spending as much in bus fare as I would be paying for an apartment in New York. So at that point, I figured that it was better just to move up here and be much closer to the auditions, because sometimes the auditions do come in last minute or the day of, and being a 20-minute subway ride away is much better than being possibly 3 hours away between getting to the bus, taking the bus being late and whatnot. So just being up here made it a lot more convenient.
Now, was it a hard decision for you? Not even so much with the move, but I mean, you were in an unusual position where you didn't live in the city in New York, but you were close enough so that agents would still work with you, and that is something that's very important for people to know about. If you're not, a star, if you're not well established, it's very difficult working in a major market if you don't live nearby. If you, like you were saying, that if you get a phone call today, if you can't be there either later today or tomorrow, it's going to be really tough for agents or managers to want to work with you because they need you there. But even before you started going to New York, what made you decide to finally say, you know what, I want to start trying to work in New York? Do you remember, even though you were still living, outside of the city, do you remember exactly what went through your brain that made you think, you know what, I want to expand. I don't want to just work in the Baltimore, DC, Northern Virginia, or Philly area. I really want to try New York. What prompted that?
Well, a lot of that actually had to do with my union status, because at the time I was a member of AFTRA, but not SAG, but I was SAG eligible. And I knew the unions were eventually going to be merging, and I knew it was going to happen within a year or 2 years. And at that point, I would be SAG and AFTRA, and I would only be able to do union work. And down in the DC, Baltimore area, there is some union work, but there's not a lot. The vast majority of the union work is going to be New York and LA. And in order to be able to be eligible for that work, again, I needed to be close to where all the action was. And I mean, as far as being outside of the city, it all came down to being reliable. You know, my agents didn't care where I was living as long as when they set up an audition for me, I was able to get there. And if I booked a job, I was going to be able to get there. So between the union status and I was booking pretty much everything non-union that I was getting down in the Baltimore and DC area, I just felt that I was ready for those bigger jobs. And being in New York was where I needed to be in order to get those bigger jobs.
Now, I know I'm kind of jumping here, and I do want to get back to you making that decision, you know, to going to New York. But a lot of times people have asked me, you know, if you get booked, let's say in New York, and you know you had to travel a distance to get there, do they pay for your transportation, or are you expected to get there yourself?
Well, the uneasy answer to that question is yes and no, they do, and they don't. If it's a non-union job, I mean, that's completely up to you to negotiate that. You know, non-union jobs, there are no set rules. I know some people that are very good at talking people into getting more money and getting those travel expenses paid, and others who, if they don't specifically say that travel is included, they just assume that they're going to be responsible for their own travel expenses. On the union side, though, that it gets very specific. They have what's called a local hire. So if you are a local hire, that means that you are responsible for your own travel because you're telling them that you live in the market wherever the project is actually filming. So if you live in Baltimore, DC, North Carolina, or Florida, and you're hired as a local hire in New York, you are responsible for all of your own travel and everything else. If you are not, and you are hired as an out-of-town client, then all of your expenses are covered, and that all goes down to the union rules. So they have those very specific distinctions to whether you're a local hire or an out-of-town client. But on the non-union side,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but no, that's okay. Like I said, on the non-union side, it's all up to you and what you can negotiate out of them for whether or not they're going to pay for travel.
And I can tell you that's why, and we are going to talk about marketing later, because that's a very important part of this component here. But that is why it's really helpful to have a really good agent, because I can tell you for somebody like me who doesn't really like to negotiate, I don't feel all that comfortable. I mean, I do it. I don't enjoy it. When you have an agent who is really good at it, it makes all the difference in the world, because sometimes the agent, you know, is able to get you more than you would get, especially if you're not comfortable doing it. And also, if the negotiations aren't going really well, it's like, you know, you don't want to start picking a fight with somebody that you haven't even worked with yet. But, you know, one of the things that I always do, and I recommend that people do, if you book a job and let's say you are considered a local hire, you know, whether it's a modeling job or an acting gig, you know, there's nothing wrong with asking to be compensated for travel. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. And they might just say, no, you're a local hire and basically it's take it or leave it. But you might be surprised. Sometimes they are able to work out deals where they'll pay you a partial amount for your mileage. You know, they'll reimburse you a certain amount per mile that you drive, and sometimes not. But I guess my overall philosophy is I like to ask. I don't always demand. But you know, sometimes that works out really well for you. So getting back to your deciding to go into New York, you didn't live in New York prior to that, correct?
That's correct. I lived in Baltimore.
Okay, so now you decide, all right, you know, I'm tired of getting on the bus. It's a long hike. I'm, you know, always waiting to work around their schedule. Sometimes you get off of projects at 2 o'clock in the morning, and now you're dealing with finding a bus ride back home, and when's the next bus, all that stuff. So you decide, all right, I'm going to move to New York. How do you go about doing that? For somebody who's never lived in New York, did you have friends who were able to recommend places to live? Did you do research on your own? What exactly did you do?
Well, in the beginning, I actually polled my friends on good neighborhoods to live because I actually grew up in New Jersey and had been to New York many times, but that was in the 90s and early 2000s. So I didn't know the area. So I pretty much just put a notice out on Facebook, hey, I'm thinking about moving to New York. Anyone interested in being my roommate, and also anyone know of any good areas? I got a great response because I heard neighborhoods such as Washington Heights, Astoria, Sunnyside, which are parts of Queens. Some people mentioned living in Hoboken, just over the river in New Jersey, or West New York, which is actually in New Jersey. And then they also mentioned places to stay away from, because parts of Harlem are not very nice, but parts of Harlem are very nice, depending on which side of the city you're on, the east side or the west side.
Actually, would you let people know which is the tougher side of Harlem?
I'm going to go ahead and say the east side because I was actually just up there yesterday, and I'm just glad it was daytime.
Got it.
But the west side over by the river is actually not so bad. But it's like anywhere in New York where one block's going to be nice, and then you go another block and it's going to be bad, and then the next 2 blocks are going to be good. So it's a lot of feeling it out. And one of the things that I also did was when I was looking at these areas was I came up here during the day and at night, and kind of walked around a little bit. Sometimes I didn't stray very far from the subway stop, but I would actually just look at the areas just to see if, would I feel safe walking out of the subway at 4 o'clock in the morning if that's when I got off the set.
And that's a really interesting comment, because I never really would have thought of checking out places in the evening. I would think, you go there during the day, you find out what the place looks like, what kind of traffic is there, how close are you to a subway. But going there at night, I think that's a great idea, just to make sure that it's a comfortable place for you.
Yeah, because like I said, some areas may be fine during the day, but at night at 4 o'clock in the morning, there might be some people out that you don't want to mess with, and that's a big problem in the city. So you definitely need to check out the areas. Especially I did, because my first roommate wound up being a woman, and there were certain places she did not want to live, and she didn't want to be more than 5 or 6 blocks from a subway stop because she wanted to feel safe being able to get home at 4 o'clock in the morning if I wasn't going to be with her or if she was going to be by herself. So definitely checking the places out daytime and nighttime, is definitely a good idea. If it's somewhere that you might think is iffy, take a cab and just drive through the area as opposed to just walking around the area. But definitely you need to check out the area daytime and nighttime.
So a couple of things that you were thinking of. First, you weren't looking at specific apartments at the beginning. You were just simply checking out neighborhoods. And then it also sounds like you wanted to make sure that you had easy access to the subway, because chances are, unless you have a whole lot of money, living in downtown Manhattan or Midtown is going to be very, very expensive. So I'm assuming that the most economical way of doing it is, living a little bit further out, but in an area where you do have easy access so that you can take the subway in whenever you need to.
Yeah. Me personally, I didn't have a problem being a mile away from a subway stop, but my roommate did, so I kind of had to compromise on that. But it definitely comes into play, especially with weather, because if you have to walk a mile from your apartment to the subway and you're wearing a suit for a nice audition and you wind up getting splashed with water because you're walking so far, it could definitely affect your chances of booking. And the closer you get to a subway stop, the more expensive the apartments actually are.
Right, and I guess the other thing too is, you book a job, you've got to bring wardrobe, and you're lugging around, 2 garment bags filled with stuff, and it's 105 degrees outside. Well, you'd probably rather not walk a mile, and you might not want to spend the money on a cab, because sometimes it's faster to take the subway. And just to ask you a really quick question about subways. One of the incredible things about living in New York is that you can either walk or take subways pretty much everywhere. I mean, you really don't need a car, and cars are actually very expensive to keep in New York if you're parking it in a garage. And I know for some areas you will spend more money on a garage for your car than you will on a mortgage in other cities throughout the United States. So is there some kind of monthly pass or an annual pass that you can buy for the subway that makes it more economical, and you don't have to deal with, getting the tickets every time you want to ride the subway?
Yeah, actually, they just changed that up a little bit. It used to be that you could only get a monthly unlimited pass, which was good for 30 days, and that used to cost $110. They raised the price $2, so now it's $112. So the instant that you use that card the first time is when your 30 days activate, and then after 30 days, it cancels. They also now have a 7-day unlimited pass, which I'm not sure how much that costs, but it's probably a little bit more than 25% of whatever the monthly card is. Because I know it's more expensive to get 4 7-day passes than to get one monthly pass. And then it's $250 per ride if you just take an individual ride anywhere in the city, if you're going one stop or if you're going 100 stops.
And the thing that's also nice, if you get the prepaid one, it will just save you a lot of time, because sometimes you could have a line at the booth where you're getting your pass, and you have to, put money in or put a credit card in. You have to wait, and if you have the prepaid pass, you just kind of swipe it, and
Yeah.
it gets you around.
So I mean, if you're going to be taking the subway more than 20 round trips per month, then the monthly pass is definitely more economical, because you don't have to worry about continually to put money on it if you're doing $20 at a time. Because I've had that happen to me before, where I got to the turnstile, had no money, went to get money, and the train came and went by the time I was putting money onto my card. So the monthly definitely helps out. And I definitely take the subway more than 20 times every month between auditions and visiting friends and booking jobs. So it's once you live in the city, just about everyone that I know has some kind of unlimited pass, whether it's the weekly or the monthly.
Okay, so you did your research. You and your roommate, you guys found a place that or an area that was good for both of you. Then how do you go about actually finding the apartment itself?
Well, we actually looked at 3 different neighborhoods. And in New York, pretty much all of the apartments are going to be found through brokers. There are very few places that you can actually find yourself. Some apartments have fees and some don't. And what that is, it's a broker fee that if you use a broker, they find you an apartment, you have to pay them what is the equivalent of 1 month's rent for finding you the apartment. Now, I know that sounds unfair, but unfortunately, the brokers are the ones that have access to all of the apartments that you want to live in. The ones that aren't roach and rodent infested, that are actually nice, and the landlords are, willing to work with you when you have damage to your apartments or whatnot. So you kind of have to pay that.
And how do you find the
However,
brokers?
I went online. I just did a search for New York brokers, looked at a couple of different ones, looked at reviews that people had posted for them, because they make commission and they work for, selling you an apartment, and they can be pushy at times. So I read the reviews for people to find out which ones were really pushy and which ones weren't so pushy. But I would spend all day with these people, and they would just take me from apartment to apartment to apartment. I would tell them I wasn't interested in any of them. They would go back to the drawing board, pick out 6 more apartments, and then the next day I'd be out again with them, going from apartment to apartment to apartment. Very tedious process, but we wound up finding a great place, which was a no-fee apartment, which is the manager of the building actually pays the fee, not you. So those are like winning the lottery, because there are not very many no-fee apartments. But if you happen to be in a building where they're trying to fill all the spots because they have a lot of empty rooms, managers are willing to pay that fee in order to get those rooms filled, because they're not making any money on an empty room. So paying 1 month's rent to get you in there is worth it in their mind.
So for somebody who, let's say, is flying in, uh, they've never lived in New York, how much time should they realistically give themselves to be able to find a place? Because they're going to be staying in a hotel, because they're going to be flying in for, let's say, a certain amount of time, getting a place, flying back home, and then beginning to move themselves in. So how many days do you think would be a realistic amount of time for someone to be able to find a place?
Well, that's a tough question because it took me about a week and a half of coming up here for 5 days at a time, where I would come up Monday, leave, come up Tuesday, leave, and you just go back and forth. Some people, they find a great apartment on the first try. I would have to say that at least a week would be your plan, and if you were doing that, you should be out looking at least 5 or 6 apartments every single day, because if you have one day where you're not looking at apartments, it's a wasted day. Ideally, if you could find a sublet for a month or couch surf for a month or have the time where you have that open availability to look at places, that would be perfect. A friend of mine is actually doing that right now. She's subletting 3 different apartments through June, July, and August while she's looking for a permanent apartment in New York. So she's, living out of a suitcase, but she has plenty of time to look at as many apartments as she wants and then find the perfect one. In the meantime, she actually found a job at a restaurant and she's doing background work. So she's finding ways to pay the bills as well. But a minimum of a week, because, you may have to look at 30 different apartments before we find the right one. Because some of the apartments I looked at, the bedroom was barely big enough for a single bed and nothing else. And that apartment was $2,200 a month. There were some apartments that were huge, so it's hit or miss. But you definitely need at least a week.
Okay, so let's say now you're in an unusual situation where you already had representation before you even moved up to New York. So let's say for somebody who does not have an agent at this point, they come in, they find a place. How do you go about finding an agent?
There's many different ways. The old school way of actually doing mailings still does work. I actually have talked to many agents that love getting headshots and the resume in the mail because it's like Christmas. They get to open up a gift every single time, and it could be the next Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt in that envelope. They don't know. Agents like Don Buchwald, he loves getting envelopes. He says he doesn't get them anymore because everyone emails him, and he thinks it's lazy. So when he gets those envelopes, he loves seeing that somebody took the time and effort to put that together to send it to him. Other agencies like Block NYC, they actually have a meeting every Wednesday where they open up envelopes to look for new talent. And I'm sure they're not the only ones. So the old school way still does work because it's a good way for you to just get your headshot and resume into their hands. Now, there's a very good chance that that envelope is just going to get tossed into the trash. It's a chance you take. But some people, most of them actually do still open the mail. Outside of that, there are things up here called industry events that are held at places like the Actors Connection, One-on-One, the Network, where it's $35 to $40 depending on where you go, and you would essentially have a Q&A with a casting director or a talent agent. We can ask them anything. This is your opportunity to ask them, what do you look for in a client? What do you look for on a resume? What kind of training do you want to see? Who's a good headshot photographer? And then you get in front of them and you either do a monologue or a commercial read. It's a great opportunity to not just be a piece of paper, but to actually show them what you can do. Because when you send them your headshot and resume through the mail, that's all you are. You're just a piece of paper and a picture. You could have lied about every single one of those credits. But at an industry event, you actually get to read for them. So they get to see you in action, which is great. I do them all the time, even now, because I'm freelancing with 2 agents in New York, but I'm looking for that next level agent that wants to sign me exclusively. So I still go to those events.
Well, and the other thing too is, I was just going to say, if it's a casting director, whether you have an agent or not, this is your opportunity to actually meet a casting director one-on-one, which
exactly.
That's the best case scenario.
Yeah, you may not be able to get into their office for an audition, but to be able to get in front of them to do a monologue or a commercial read at one of these industry events, they at least get to see, oh, wow, that's a great actor. I definitely want to bring him in next time, but I have something that fits something of his type.
And actually, would you just mention just one more time some of those places that
Sure.
offer those network services?
The 2 big ones are Actors Connection and One-on-One. Actors Connection, anyone can sign up to those events on their websites, and they also do classes. One-on-One is a little bit more picky. They actually make you audition before you can take any of their industry events. You have to bring in 2 monologues. You read for somebody. They like you or they don't. If they don't, you just wait a couple of months and you audition again. But the difference with one-on-one is that if an agent comes in and does an event, if they want to come back, they have to prove to one-on-one that they brought in like a certain number of people from that event for interviews. So if you go to an event and there's 20 people in the classroom, at least 2 or 3 of them are going to be brought in for interviews at that agent's office if they want to come back. Actors Connection doesn't make that guarantee. Neither does the network. That's another one. Or there's another one called CNC Studios. That's run by a guy named Jagger Kay. He also does many events where he gets some great people like Brett Goldstein, Donna McKenna, the casting directors, agents from DDO, Buckwald. So all these places get some high-named and high-profile agencies. It's just your way of getting in front of them as opposed to just sending them a headshot and resume so you can show them your acting ability.
And so basically what you can do is you can go to their websites, find out when their next event is happening, and see who's going to be there.
Exactly. And they tell you the name of the person who's going to be there, so you can see if it's the main agent, an assistant, or a junior agent, so you get to see exactly who it is who's going to be in that room with you. So you know it's not just the secretary that's going to be there. It's actually the junior casting director or the senior casting director or the junior agent or the senior agent.
Well, you know what it seems like, I mean, along with doing that, some of the other things that are going to be needed is, like you had mentioned before, you're going to need a great headshot because, you know, especially for people that aren't seeing you in person, that's going to be the only thing that they're going to be able to see. And so if your headshot's not really good, it's going to make it, you know, pretty difficult. It seems like another way of just making connections, and we talked about this earlier, is doing extra work. And I know, you know, for some actors, they refuse to do extra work, which I completely understand. You know, they feel like it's either beneath them or they feel like they just don't want to, you know, deal with it. It's not paying enough for them, or, you know, there's a whole variety of reasons. And I have no problem, you know, with people who say they don't want to do extra work. Personally, I think it can be a great experience for people, not only for people who are just getting started, even for people who are established, of continuing to make contacts, to continue to learn in the industry. You know, it depends on the situation. You know, if you are one of, you know, 30,000 people filling up a football stadium for a movie, you might not get a chance to really watch some of the principal actors up close and really see what they're doing. But sometimes, you know, you could be in a scene with 3 or 4 other people and you're getting a chance to watch and listen to the director. You're watching the principal actors. And it can be an incredible learning experience. And especially in, you know, in New York, you know, you're going to meet so many other actors who are trying to get more work. So to me, it seems like doing extra work, especially in New York, can be very beneficial for people.
Yeah, actually, that's how I got started, was doing background work non-union, which doesn't pay very well. I think the going rate is $98 for 10 hours, which basically is minimum wage. But yeah, I would get on set. I would easily be able to find the people who looked like they knew what they were doing. And I would ask them, where are you finding casting notices? Where do you find how to get in touch with agents and casting directors? You know, I would ask them. And, you know, that's how I found out about these places like the Actors Connection and One-on-One, and how to get in front of them, how to meet the right people, where to go to find casting notices. Since being non-union at the time, I didn't have an agent, so I was my own agent. So I needed to find out where they were posting the casting notices. And these people were usually more than willing to help me out. And sometimes it would be very standoffish, but that'd be fine. I'd thank you for your time, and I would just move on to the next person. Because as you said, there's usually dozens of people just milling around, and you have nothing to do but sit around and wait, either reading books or watching movies or talking to each other. I still do background work just because I know tomorrow that I'm not working, so I get booked today to do background tomorrow, and I'm either sitting on my butt watching TV or I'm on set making a couple $100 because it pays a little better for the union actors. But yes, you know, there are some people that get labeled just background actors, and they're happy with that, or, some people need to step away from it. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing background work, especially in the beginning, to make connections and to find out, certain things, like finding out where to find casting notices.
Right. I mean, and there is that fine line. You don't want to be in a situation, if you want to do principal work, where all you do is background work, because then it's going to be really tough to try to, actually get to principal work. But there are people who are completely fine about just spending, 5 days a week doing extra work, or 6 days a week. Um, Now, there are a handful of, I guess, like the bigger casting directors who just deal with extras in New York. And I know I listed some of them. I know there's Central Casting, there's Barbara McNamara, um, Faye, oh, is it Sylvia?
Sylvia Faye Legenic.
Right. And then I thought there was were there like one or two other?
There's also Grant Wolfley. Actually, between Grant and Central Casting, they probably cover about 80% of all the background work in New York, with some of the smaller ones being Sylvia Faye, AmeriCast, that's another casting company. Background Inc. does background casting for commercials, which pay really well. I think that's about it. There's a couple. Heather Comer at Comer, and I always mispronounce the other one, Galliucci, I think it is. They do casting for shows like The Good Wife and a couple others, some movies that come through town. But the big ones are going to be Central Casting, which is not the same Central Casting in DC and Baltimore, Grant Wolfley, and Sylvia Faye Legenic Casting. Those three cover pretty much the majority of all the background casting.
And so for somebody who wants to be considered for extra work with those people, what's the process?
It depends on the casting company. Sylvia Faye Legenic Casting, they use Agency Pro. So you go to their website and you can register through them. They say specifically that you do not have to pay for Agency Pro to be considered for their background work. Because with Agency Pro, you can set up 2 pictures in your resume for free. You're going to get an email every month that says you're missing out on all these big jobs because you're not paying the monthly fee to be activated on their account. Ignore them. Those aren't coming from the casting director. Those are coming from Agency Pro. So once you're registered on Agency Pro and you get emails from Sylvia Faye saying, hey, we need these types of background. If you're available, go to Agency Pro and confirm your availability. Central Casting, on the other hand, they have open calls where you essentially just show up, you fill out a form, they take a Polaroid picture, which never looks good for anybody. I have yet to run into anyone that likes their picture on Central Casting's profile. And then a couple of weeks later, they'll send you an email that links you to their website that they use called Casting Networks. That doesn't cost anything if you register through Central Casting, but you can only use their picture, and then you have to fill out a profile for them. And then once that happens, you can start doing background work through them, because you can go to the Casting Networks website, see what they have available. If you fit what they're looking for, you can submit your picture. Brent Wolfley, every now and then they have an open call, but for the most part, what you have to do is set up your own personal profile on Casting Networks, which I think now costs $35 to set up, where you get 2 pictures and your resume. And then it's like some other sites where you have to pay per submission. So I think it's a couple of dollars each time you submit yourself, or you can pay $5 a month and you can submit yourself unlimited times, which I would definitely recommend, because I submit myself sometimes 10 or 20 times a day. So once you're set up there,
you're saying literally 10 or 20 times a day.
Well, at any given point in New York, in the fall especially, there's going to be 20 to 30 TV shows that are casting every week that they probably need hundreds, if not thousands, of background actors every week. Multiply that by 30 different TV shows, that's 30,000 to 3,000 actors that they need for the background every single week. Same thing with movies. Right now is the slow time for TV in New York. There's only 3 TV shows that are filming, but there's 11 films that are currently filming in New York. Each one of them, sometimes, I know The Amazing Spider-Man 2, there was one day they needed 1,000 background actors. Batman, when they filmed that big scene at the end where the cops were fighting all of the bad guys, there were 1,000 background actors on that set that day. So there's tons and tons of work out there. Some people work regularly, some people don't work regularly. It all comes down to your look. But once you're signed up with those 3 agencies, Central Casting and Grant Wolfley through Casting Networks and Sylvia Faye Lee-Gennick through Agency Pro, then you're set. Some of the other companies like Heather Comer's casting company, they accept email submissions and I believe mail and email, and every now and then they do an open call. AmeriFilms is another one that you can just mail them your headshot and resume to be on file, and I don't remember who the other one was.
And for any of those places, probably the best thing, also is, to visit their website and, follow exactly what they're asking you to do. But,
Yeah.
but it seems like, and you tell me, I mean, for somebody who's just coming into New York, they're trying to, find their way around, it seems like this would be a great way to at least get started and start building connections and getting a better understanding of, what they need to be doing to start having the success that they want.
Absolutely, and it's a great way to get eligible to join the union. Because when you're filming a TV show, the first, I believe it's 25 background, first 25 background actors have to be union actors. Then numbers 26 through 10,000 can be non-union. Well, if it's a 4 a.m. call time and they only have 24 union actors on set because somebody didn't show up, they either have to find somebody from the union to get to set in the next 5 minutes, or they're going to grab one of the non-union actors and say, you're a union actor for today. You're getting a waiver. Once you get 3 of those waivers, then you're eligible to join the union. Not like AFTRA before where you could just pay money to join the union. Now, since they merged, the only way you can get in is either being upgraded to a speaking role or if you get 3 waivers. So even if you're not interested in joining the union right away, it's good to get eligible so that when you are ready, you can just join whenever you want.
Right, and the other thing too is it doesn't even have to be that last minute. You can also talk with the casting directors and say, look, I really want to join the union. Please keep me in mind whenever you need to fill a slot for a union member. Call me anytime. And that's another good way. I know plenty of people who've gotten into the union that way.
Yeah. Or to do that when you get on set. To tell the person checking in, look, if nobody shows up or somebody doesn't show up and you need to fill a waiver, I'll take it. Let them know as soon as you get on set so that they're like, okay, Ron wants a waiver. Hey, Ron, this guy didn't show up. You get his slot.
And the other thing too, and certainly I wouldn't be doing extra work thinking that this is going to happen, but it happens all the time where non-union actors get upgraded. I mean, so do union extra actors can get upgraded, and for whatever reason, the director feels that a word or a line needs to be said by somebody, and basically they will give you a line, and all of a sudden you've just gone from being an extra to being a principal, being a day player for that day, which might change your fees for the day 10 times, literally. So anyhow,
it's rare, but it happens.
It does happen, yeah, and I've seen it happen even in commercials as well as TV shows and feature films. I see it more for feature films than for TV shows, but in either case, so somebody's in town, they found a place, they're starting to make connections through some of those events. They are also making connections through doing some extra work. What would be the next step that you would recommend? Let's say even if somebody did find an agent, and it's an agent, it's a person with a small agency, they're getting sent out every once in a while, but they really want to start marketing themselves more in the city. What would you recommend that somebody do?
Well, just having an agent doesn't mean that you're set, because there's a lot of actors that think as soon as I join the union, agent's going to be lined up outside the union office waiting to sign me, and then as soon as they sign me, I'm going to be working on my next big budget movie in a week, and then I'm going to be rich and famous. Not the way it happens, especially in New York and LA. Once I had my agent here, the saying is, like, you have an agent that takes 20% of your money and they do 20% of your work. So you are still responsible for doing 80% of your work. When I was non-union, probably 80 to 90% of the jobs that I was booking were jobs that I was finding myself, because my agent was only really interested in the higher paying jobs that paid $1,000 or more. I was fine working a student film that paid $50 or a feature film that only paid me $200. Those couple of $100 that I was fine with, and it got me great exposure, but my agent wasn't really interested in. So I just went to sites like Actors Access, which is a great website to be registered with because there's a ton of stuff on there on the non-union side, whether it be feature films, short films, student films, which some of them actually do pay. That site there, you can set up a free profile where they get you 2 pictures and your resume, and it costs $2 per submission, or you sign up with another site called showfax.com. Right now, I think it's $68 for the year, and you can submit unlimited times on Actors Access because those 2 sites are actually linked together. So once you have that, you can start submitting for student films and features and shorts and even the union work. Because even though you're non-union, you can still submit yourself for union work and go in and audition for union jobs because you get 1 freebie. You can do 1 job as a non-union actor for free before you're forced to join the union. So definitely still submit for those union jobs, even if you're non-union. My first union job I got as a non-union actor, it was a speaking role on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So it does happen. But Actors Access is one of the big sites, and also Backstage. Backstage is a weekly magazine that's printed up here in New York, but they also do casting notices. There's a lot of theater casting notices, but also feature films, short films, independent, like all that stuff is also on that site as well.
And does it cost, excuse me, Ron, does it cost anything for on backstage.com?
Backstage, you have 2 options. You can get an online account, which will give you access to their casting, and you can also upload your pictures and resume. Or you can also pay for the online and the print version, where you get the newspaper mailed to you every week. I want to say that it's about $200 a year to get the print and the online version, or just $100 for just the online, where you get access to the casting notices and your headshot resume on there. But that's the only cost, because you can actually upload film video clips as well, and that's free. Whereas on sites like Actors Access, it costs $22 to upload a 60-second clip. So those 2 sites hold the majority of the work. Casting Networks is also starting to post a lot of principal jobs, especially on the non-union commercial side. So between those 3 sites, that's pretty much where you're going to find 80 to 90% of all of the work, whether it be union or non-union, or the union jobs that are actually sent out to the actors, which are few and far between. And it's hard to find those union jobs if you don't have an agent. But for the non-union side, it covers about 90% of all the casting notices that are put out there. Those are great resources to use. And a lot of times, they don't ask you where you're at. So you can be in Baltimore or DC or Philadelphia and be submitting to those New York jobs. All they care about is that you can show up for the audition and that you can show up for the job. So those are the main sites where you're going to go to find the casting notices that your agent may not be interested in, but you are, because each one of those roles now gives your agent another way to market yourself. Because if it's an independent film that's going to go into the festival circuit and it wins an award at the Tribeca Film Festival, the New York Film Festival, or any of the hundreds of film festivals out there, now your agent can represent you as a award-winning actor because your film won an award, or you won an award for Best Actor or Best Supporting Actor. So continually getting yourself out there is your best marketing tool.
It's something that you touched on that I just wanted to expand on a little bit more, which is really, I think, very important. When you mentioned student films, especially in a city like New York, where you've got at NYU, and was it the Tisch School, I think, where they have a lot of the filmmaking classes. What an incredible opportunity to have a chance to audition and hopefully work on a student film. And, you know, once again, you might not get any money from doing that, but it's like, who cares? I mean, you're going to get a chance to, you know, work with hopefully some really talented people, some people that who knows where their career might go. And hopefully, I mean, because you read about this all the time. There are a lot of students who, you know, stay together after they've graduated. They continue to work together. They continue to work with actors that they had in their student films. And it's an opportunity to help build up your acting reel, which, you know, where you take clips from whether it's a TV show, whether it's a film, whether it's a commercial that you've done. And this is also, it's a good way to introduce yourself to an agent at some point if they want to see, your headshot, and they might say, well, do you have a reel I can look at? So if you've done a number of student films, and assuming that they are good, I mean, there's no guarantee, but assuming that they're good, that also gives you an opportunity to build up your reel, and that also would be a kind of job that an agent wouldn't be promoting and pushing really hard for because there might not be any money involved with it.
This is true. Yeah. Even on the union side, the student contract allows for deferred payment, which means if the project actually makes money, then I get paid what I would have gotten paid as a union actor. They normally don't make money. So deferred payment essentially means you're not getting paid. But these schools usually have some phenomenal equipment. I've worked on student films before where their cameras were better than most independent films that I've worked on because NYU has the money to afford the best camera equipment. And these students, their grades are on the line. So they're going to be working their butts off to make sure that they get the best film possible so that they get an A, not an F. Otherwise, they're not going to pass. And that's right. You never know who you're going to be working with. This could be the next Catherine Bigelow or the next George Lucas that you're working with. 10 years down the road, you're working with an agent and this person is a big director. Like, hey, I worked with him as a student. Maybe he'll remember me. Mention to him that, Ron Bush worked on your student film while you were on NYU. He may remember that, and that may get you an audition. It's looking long term. But yeah.
Or who knows? They might even have something written for you because they love working with you as a student, and they just landed this small independent film, and they're going to be taking it to festivals, and they work with Ron, and he was great. So let's make sure he's a part of this next project.
Yeah, and the quality is usually really good. I actually have a clip from a student film on my demo reel that my agent uses because it turned out really good, and the equipment they were using was phenomenal. The writing was great. So yeah, I mean, there's 90% of the time, it's going to be great to work on a student film. I have heard some horror stories, but they're usually few and far between because schools don't want to be associated with people that aren't treating actors right or aren't doing good work. So there's very few people that you're not going to meet that aren't professional, especially on student films. So yeah, they're definitely a very great resource. Plus, it's something to add to your resume. If all you have is background work on your resume, you may not have the chops to be able to audition for the big feature films, but a student film is going to be more than willing to work with you. And that could be your first speaking credit on your resume, or your second, third, fourth. So now you have some real credits on your resume that might help you get an agent, or it might show to the agent, hey, I have this credit, here's the copy of the project I did. What do you think? Oh, wow, this is phenomenal. Great. Put it on your reel. Put it on your website. This is going to help me get you more auditions. So yeah, student films are an excellent resource.
And you can also put those on places like Actors Access. Now, you do pay an additional fee for that because it's not unusual where if somebody's casting for a film, they might say, please send your reel. And so there's a little box that you can check off. And if you have your reel there, then people can see your reel as well. So, once again, you're not going to start off with a great reel, but, you slowly and surely, start taking little bits, little clips from each project that you've done, and you create a, maybe a minute or a little bit over a minute reel. And, yeah, you can start showing that around. Now, you were also like in an unusual position where, here you moved to New York to have access to New York, but you also market yourself outside of New York as well. And do you find, are there many people living in New York who are actively trying to get work, whether it's in Philadelphia or New Jersey or in Connecticut and other areas? Or do you think most New York actors just, or models, just stick around in New York?
No, pretty much all of us are willing to go wherever the work is. My roommate now actually also has an apartment in D.C., and he uses New York as his crash pad, but he's always back and forth all the time. He's actually in D.C. for the next 2 weeks working on a film, and then he comes up here anytime that he has an audition. I have an agent down in Florida who represents me for shows such as Vampire Diaries, The Walking Dead, Army Wives, anything that shoots pretty much from North Carolina and south, where she'll get me an audition, I videotape the audition, I send it to her, and she sends it to the casting director. I mean, it's great because I don't have to go down there for these auditions. and she can represent me from Florida. Every now and then she comes up to New York, for meetings and whatnot. But yeah, I have a friend of mine who lives in LA, and she has agents in 11 different states. And all of her auditions that she does are via video. She'll upload the clip to Actors Access, or sometimes she'll just email the clip straight to her agent. She books the job. Sometimes she has to pay for her travel to wherever she's going. Sometimes she doesn't. But I mean, if it's going to cost me $300 or $400 to fly down to North Carolina to be on Army Wives, which is going to pay me $1,000 or $2,000, I would absolutely do that. So yeah, pretty much everyone that I know is willing to go wherever the work is. And there's buses from New York that go to Philadelphia, go to Baltimore, go to DC, Virginia, $6 to get up to Boston. There's a small market up there for acting, but it's up there. So yeah, no, definitely people will go wherever the work is, because if you can't find it in New York, might as well go wherever you can.
Yeah, or and not to say that you can't find it in New York, you just might be free one day and somebody calls and says, "Hey, are you available next week for this project?" Well, yeah, I mean, as long as you don't have anything booked out, even if you are working in New York, I guess a lot of it depends on how much you do want to work. I mean, some people have full-time jobs, and they periodically will take, some time off and do a job. There are other people that are trying to, either make a living at it or just trying to get as much work as they possibly can, which kind of brings me to probably the last point before we start going to questions from everybody. But are there certain types of jobs that you can recommend that people try to take on, especially when they're first coming to New York City, that will allow them to, make enough to cover rent and cover their living expenses and still be able to go out and audition and do work?
Yeah, the few big ones that are used obviously are being a server, because that's usually the most convenient job. I actually work at a restaurant, Dave and Buster's, once or twice a week. Usually it doesn't interfere with anything, but if so, I've got 100 other servers that I work with that I can find to take my shift if I need to give it up for a job or for an audition. Promo work, there's more of it for women than there are for men, but promo work is where you work for a company. Sometimes liquor companies will hire women to go out to bars to give out shots. People like Noxema will hire you to hand out packets on the corner of West 42nd Street in the middle of Times Square. Those jobs usually pay, $10 to $20 an hour. So, and I know some people that do a very good living doing promotional work. It's just a couple of hours, and they can do it on days when they're not acting.
Now, do you have to find
Outside of
a specific, excuse me, Ron, do you have to find a specific agent for promotional work?
Depends on the work. My agent in Florida actually represents a lot of promo workers, but that's mainly down in the South, where they do a lot of conferences that pay a lot of money, so it's worth it for her to find work for her people. Most of the time, no. You're going to find the promo jobs on your own, because they do only pay $150 or $100, and for an agent to do all of that work, if they take 10% or 20%, they're talking about $20 for all of their effort. That's usually not worth it for them to do it. For promo work, that's just something where you find out by asking other people. Something to ask someone when you're doing background work. Do you do promo work? Oh, what's the name of the company? And most of them, you can go to their website, submit your headshot and resume, and then you get put into their database, and then they pretty much email you or call you whenever they have something coming up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know there are some companies that I've seen, and that's specifically all they do. It's just
Yeah.
for promotional work, and so they get hired, whether it's having people work at a convention and you're standing by a booth and you're handing out literature, or things like that. Um, and actually, depending on the kind of job, it can work out, like you were saying, it can work out pretty well for you. But there are a handful of just promotional companies that I've run across, and they deal with people all throughout the country, depending on where the work is. So yeah, it seems like doing promotional work, certainly working as a server someplace, could be really good as well. I know some people who are substitute teachers, and basically, they get a phone call the day before and say, "Hey, do you want to work the next day at a school?" And they take that on because that pays pretty well. Um, but yeah, it seems like there are a number of ways that people can try to find some kind of survival jobs. But the key thing is you do want to make sure that it's not interfering with being able to go out and audition because that's why you're there. I mean, that's why you
Yeah,
move to the city because what happens for some people is they get so caught up in trying to survive that they don't get an opportunity to do what they really wanted to do. And that's why I also always recommend that you try to save up enough money for, to not have to work for at least 3 or 4 months just to get yourself settled, to, hopefully try to make connections with being able to go out and start getting work, at some point. At least that way you can settle in, start finding the right classes. You can start going to the right events, finding, a good headshot photographer. Maybe if you're trying to do commercial modeling work, you find somebody to start doing commercial shots with you, so you can build up a comp card or a composite sheet at some point. But it is really important not to go into a city broke, especially a city like New York, because then all you're
yeah,
going to do is spend all your time surviving, that's not why you want to be there.
yeah. Well, before I left Baltimore, I actually picked up a second job delivering pizzas at Domino's, and I pretty much told myself once I had $7,000 in the bank that I was ready to move because that would have covered first and last month rent, broker fee if I had to pay it, moving all my stuff up there, and then a bit of a cushion, if it took me a little while to find a job. But yeah, before you move anywhere, you definitely need to have that cushion built up because if you're trying to find a survival job, it may take you a while. I got lucky where I was working at a restaurant down in Baltimore that just transferred me to their restaurant in New York. That doesn't always happen. If I had just had to start looking for a job as a waiter, it may have taken me 6 to 9 months to find a job because there's always people looking for waiting jobs and they're not always there. So it's definitely good to have that buffer saved up before you move.
Fantastic. So it seems like, just to kind of sum things up right before we go to questions, it's learning the layout of the land, finding out where is a good place to live, make sure it's reasonable, make sure it's safe, make sure you have easy access to subways, start making connections by going to the events, maybe doing extra work, making sure you've got some way of making an income while you are getting started, because sometimes it can take a while for you to start
Yeah,
clicking with an agent and start booking jobs, start marketing yourself, in many different avenues. And you know, look, I know it can be a very intimidating kind of city. Everybody talks about all these great projects they worked on, whether it's true or not. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. But the key thing is you have to understand that most of the really successful actors who are living in New York, a majority of them came from very small markets. And that's why I also think it's really helpful to try to get as much experience as you can prior to going to a major market like New York. There are some people who just decide to go to New York with no experience, and I'm sure have had real success there. But like with any business, the more training that you've had, the more work experience that you've had, the greater the chances are that when you do go to New York, you'll be able to reach the success that you want because you're not just starting from scratch. You've already built up, a resume. It might not be the major feature films or the major television shows, but even if it's commercials, even if it's training films, maybe you did some radio commercials, and you've studied with some really good people prior to going to New York. So then when you hit the city, you've got something that you can lean back on. You've had some history, you've had good experiences, and now you just want to reach the next level as opposed to starting from the very very beginning. So personally, that's what I always recommend for people as well. Get as much experience as you possibly can before moving to New York. So,
absolutely.
hey, I would just want to find out, Joel, are you ready to start popping in with questions from people?
Absolutely, Aaron. We're going to have some
Okay,
questions here
great.
that are coming in. I want to start with a question somebody typed in, and then somebody's raised their hand, so I'm going to mute him in a second. But this is from Jen, currently living in San Francisco. She writes, Ron, what was the hardest obstacle for you when first moving to New York City?
Uh, the prices was my highest obstacle, actually paying for everything. But from the acting side, was finding the work because I was used to Baltimore and D.C. You know, like I knew a lot of people down there, and I was getting hired just from the people that I knew. I didn't even have to audition. I mean, there were lower paying jobs, but there were people that I had worked with in the past. In New York, I was starting from scratch. Nothing that I did in Baltimore honestly mattered because all the films that I did down there, they didn't know any of those production companies. They didn't know any of those directors. So, I mean, as far as they knew, I made up all of those credits. So it didn't matter that I had been in 30, 40, 45 different films, student, independent, shorts, features, none of that mattered. So I was pretty much starting from scratch. And it was kind of scary, you know, because here I was thinking, okay, well, I'm ahead of the curve. I've got all this experience. And I mean, yeah, I had my demo reel that helped me out a little bit. But besides that, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any of the casting directors like I knew down in Baltimore. I didn't know any of the independent film directors like I did down in Baltimore. You know, it's a much larger market, so there were many more people that I had to meet. So just trying to figure out where to find the casting notices, how to get in front of the casting directors, how to get an agent that's going to get me work. You know, that was the scariest thing. And I was lucky because my parents lived in New Jersey, so if I ever needed somebody to stroke my ego and tell me how great I was, I could just take the train back to see my parents. But otherwise, yeah, just being in the new city and coming to the realization that I was actually starting out from scratch, even though I had been acting for 5 years and had all of these credits, you know, that was scary, thinking that nothing that I did in Baltimore mattered because now I had to reprove myself living in New York and in this new city. If I eventually move out to LA, I'm going to have to do the exact same thing because nobody's going to know all the small stuff that I did in New York unless it's a TV show or a film that's, you know, a big budget film. They're not going to know who all these independent filmmakers are out in New York. So LA, again, I'm going to have to start all over from scratch, meet new casting directors, get another agent out there. So it's just that aspect of moving to a new city, probably the scariest for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Tommy raised his hand to ask a question live. So Tommy, I just want to make sure that I'm going to get ready to unmute you here. When I do, if we start getting feedback, just turn your speakers down or put a set of headphones in so it cancels out your speakers. But I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now and see if we can get you on the line. Tommy, are you there?
I'm here, but I haven't raised my hand or anything.
Oh, well, it looked like you'd raised your hand on the GoToMeeting control panel. Well, why have you unmuted? Do you have any questions for Ron, or are you good right now?
Not right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and mute you again. My apologies that I misinterpreted the hand raise. This is from Jeff in Nashville. Jeff writes, since I don't currently live in New York, how can I connect with a New York agent prior to moving there?
Well, your first thing is, honestly, from Tennessee, send them your headshot and resume through the mail. If you have access to videotaping equipment, make sure they know that. If you have the funds available, if necessary, to go up there for auditions, make sure they know that. Anytime, when I dealt with my agent in Florida, we actually found each other on casting networks because you can actually look up agents there. And I sent her my headshot and resume, told her that I was willing to fly down to Florida for any and all auditions. If I had to pay my own expenses when I booked the job, I was fine with that. If she needed me to put myself on video, I could do that. And so far, anytime that she's asked me to audition for something, I had it to her the next day. So I've proven to her that I'm reliable. I would say the same thing for agents up here in New York. You know, sometimes they may request that you meet them in person, or they may ask to meet you via Skype. You know, you can tell them that you have a webcam available and that you're willing to speak with them via Skype. It's really hit or miss because some agents only want to work with people in New York. You could probably ask, if you're an actor in Memphis, ask your fellow actors there if they deal with anybody. I'm sure one or two of them have agents in other states. Some agents actually on their websites will say that they welcome out-of-state talent. So look at their websites. Use Google. Google is your friend. Just Google New York agents with out-of-state talent. I'll guarantee you'll find a couple of forum posts about somebody saying, oh, wow, I just signed with an agent in New York, even though I live in Kansas. You know, so use the internet. look at their website, send them your headshot and resume through the mail. I mean, unless they specifically ask to see you in person, you can hide the fact that you live in Memphis by not using a return address for Memphis, or initially when I started looking for people in New York, I got a Google Voice number with a New York area code, which is now my New York number. So if you call this 347 number, it goes to my cell phone, which has an Atlanta phone number, because I used to live in Atlanta. So, there's different ways. You can try to hide the fact that you don't live in New York, but if they ask you to come up there, you're going to have to go up here.
Yeah,
or you can just tell them straight out, hey, I don't live in New York, but I am available at the drop of a hat to get up there if necessary.
yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, typically I found that, trying to kind of disguise the fact that you don't live in New York, it's going to catch up to you at some point, only because there are only so many times that you're going to be able to say, I can't be there in 2 hours, or I can't be there tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And so I like Ron's idea of, trying to find an agent who is willing to work with somebody from out of town. But it is difficult simply because things happen so quickly and they want you there. And the fact is, there are thousands of people who are there that they can choose from. Now, if you are thinking about moving to New York, and maybe that's what you were referring to, and you live in Nashville, when you are contacting agents, let them know that you are going to be in New York on a certain date. You are moving to New York, because at least that way they know, okay, so the person's going to be local, and then you can ask if we could, if we could set up a meeting, love to come in and talk with you, and at least that way they know that you are going to be there.
And also, since you live in Tennessee, actually Atlanta is blowing up right now. They're actually in the process of building 2 huge new studios, one that's going to rival Steiner Studios up here in New York, which Steiner is one of the biggest studios in New York. They're building a big studio down in Atlanta, and as far as I know, there's at least 3 or 4 TV shows that are filming in Atlanta. So that production hub there is blowing up. So if that's something that you can get to, more easily than New York, you might want to start with Atlanta, because I think that's 6 hours from Memphis. I might be mistaken, but
depending on where you are, that is a possibility. Actually, and I just flew back from working on a film in Atlanta, and you're right, it's hopping. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So Joel, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, thanks, guys. So let's get into. We have an international person from London. This is Emily. She says, how difficult is it to get a work visa that would allow me to work in New York? I guess because she's a British or UK citizen. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can look. I'm not an attorney, doing immigration. So I can just tell you, it's done all the time. I mean, there are tons of British actors who are working in the States. I can also tell you, it's difficult. You're going to have an agent who is really wanting you. So if that's the case, look, they can work all that stuff out. They can handle the paperwork with you. So absolutely, it's doable. I mean, Ron, when you were talking about in Baltimore, well, they shot The Wire, the HBO show. Unfortunately, it's no longer on. And there were at least 2 of the principals who were from the UK. And although they sounded like they were from Baltimore, they were really just unbelievable actors. So, yeah, it's done all the time, but it is tricky and it is hard, and you have to have an agent that really wants you badly to get all the paperwork done so that you can legally work in the States.
Yeah, I know a little bit about this because I've actually dealt with some actors who were international, and from what I've heard from them, you either have to have an agent or a conservatory or a theater company sponsor you on H1, is it? Or H4, that's whatever the visa is for international actors. They will sponsor you, which will get you into the U.S. on essentially a theater work visa, or a student visa if it's a theater conservatory where you can start working as an actor, but they're the ones that sponsor you. And there are a lot of places that do it. I know off the top of my head, just because I took his class, Tom Todoroff does a 2-year conservatory where they do sponsor international students. there are agents that will sponsor international students. I know there are some international talent agencies. If you hook up with one in London, they may be able to get you hooked up with their New York office. And if you do theater in the UK, I mean, that right there, those people might know other theater companies in New York that are willing to sponsor international students. So it's all about finding somebody, whether it be an agent, a conservatory, a theater company that is willing to sponsor you to get you over to the U.S. to where you can start working on those jobs. Because if you are an international, then I know the first thing they're going to ask you is, do you have a work visa? Do you have a green card? Are you sponsored by anybody? So there's no working under the table on movie and TV sets, I can tell you that much. They're very, very specific about their paperwork. So if you don't have that type of visa, there's no wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They won't get you onto the set unless you have that paperwork.
Great answer, guys. Thank you. This is from Carrie in Utah. This is a really interesting question. My current headshot is getting me some local work, I guess in Utah, obviously. And here's what the question is: should I expect to have a new headshot taken by a New York photographer for the New York market, or can I use my current headshot?
Ron, do you want to go first on that, and then I'll pop in?
Sure. I would say yes. To get started with, you can use your current headshot until you get something better. You should always stay current with your headshot. And if you're moving to different markets, yes, I think you should get a headshot done by somebody in that market, because New York, LA, Utah, Atlanta, they're all very different markets, and the styles change. You know, one year it was horizontal, now it's vertical, some was color, some not color. You know, because New York is a theater town, they wanted black and white. Now everyone wants color, regardless of theater and film. So yes, once you get to a new city, you should absolutely use a new headshot photographer, unless you happen to hook up with an agent who says, no, your headshot is great, it's going to work perfectly. But if you don't have that agent, I would say yes. When you move to New York or LA, get that new headshot.
I think that's a great point too. I mean, you'll show it to some agents and let them determine whether it's a headshot that works in the New York market. One other thing to keep in mind, that if you do decide to work with a New York headshot photographer when you move to New York, it's another form of networking for you, because you can talk to the photographer and ask the photographer, you know, are there certain agents that you would recommend that I should contact based on my look? And headshot photographers, for the ones who just make their living doing headshots, they're in touch with agents all the time. So it would be a good investment. But I like your idea, Ryan. I mean, show it around first. And if they happen to say, hey, this is great, this is perfect, it's exactly what you need, okay, so then you don't need it right away. But chances are, at some point, you're going to want to put together a new headshot taken by somebody in New York.
Yeah, if you go to those industry events that I talked about, where you meet the casting directors and the agents, they will be very straightforward. I actually started taking a class with a casting director on Tuesday, and two of the students, she just looked at the headshot, was like, I don't like this headshot. You need a new headshot. So they're very outspoken, and those are the professionals that are going to be hiring you or getting you work, so they're definitely your best resource.
You're saying New Yorkers are direct and outspoken? I can't believe that. All right. This is from Denise in Arkansas. I was thinking of spending the summer in New York to test out the waters. Will a New York agent work with someone who's only available for a few months?
Yes, maybe, no. I mean, there's no straightforward answer to that. Because if you contact agents and tell them, hey, I'm only in New York for the summer, you know, it takes more than a week or 2 weeks or even 3 months for you to get established with an agent, because you're new to the market. So they need to submit your headshot and resume to the casting directors for the jobs. Casting directors don't know who you are, so they may not be immediately receptive to you. You know, it may be 4 months of the agent submitting you to that casting director before they finally call you in for an audition. So you're probably going to find that you're going to be limited in who you can get in contact with. I mean, it's going to take you this 3 months just to get acclimated to the city, to figure out the subway system, you know, where to go to eat, where to find clothes if you need them for auditions. And it may take you 3 months just to get that first interview with an agent. I mean, I know people that have been living here for 5+ years and they still don't have an agent because they haven't been able to get into that room. So you're limiting yourself. It's like going to LA for pilot season. You know, if you don't know anybody in LA, you don't have an agent out there, you don't know any of the casting directors, you're not going to have much luck because you're not going to get into any of those pilot auditions unless you have an agent or unless you know people there. I mean, if you're only thinking of coming to New York for 3 months and then leaving and then maybe coming back a year later to move there permanently, that's going to hurt you. Because I don't think that 3 months would really be enough time to get yourself a foothold in New York, you know, to be able to meet the people that are going to help you the most.
Yeah, I guess, and I have a slightly different take on that in the sense, and I mean, I think you're right about a lot of those things. But one thing that is possible, especially if you're young, if you're a high school student, and you're thinking about maybe going to college in New York, or maybe you're older and you are planning on moving to New York, but you just want to get a feel for the city, you know, you might be able to find an agent who understands you're only going to be there for 2 or 3 months, but you're going to be coming back. And so this might be an opportunity for you to, you know, spend a little time with the agent. Like, not to say that you're not going to book anything during that time period, because you could. Look, there are people who go out and book jobs for on the very first audition that they have. So that is a possibility. But you know, you might find an agent who might say, look, you're not going to be on my, you know, the top of my priority list because I'm going to invest all my time with, you know, people who are here right now. But sure, why don't you come on out, spend a couple months, either whether it's for print, you know, we'll send you out on a bunch of go-sees, we'll see what happens. You know, maybe we can try to introduce you to some people that, you know, that we know. And I think that the only way that could really work successfully for you is if the agent believes that you're going to be coming back within a certain time period to be living in New York on a more regular basis. Because, you know, like Ron said, you know, it can take quite a few months just to develop a relationship with the, you know, with the agent, and you're just beginning to meet some of the other industry professionals. But I would definitely give it a shot, you know, and see what agents have to say. The worst they can do is say no. And you might find some people who will say, sure, why don't we try that out and see what happens. And at least that way you'll have a chance just to get a little bit of a feel for the city. And you might go there and fall in love with New York and say, this is where I want to be. I've got to be here. Or you might go to New York and say, there's just no way I can live here. It's too congested. There are too many people. For whatever reason, that might be, you know, a good way for you just to observe and get a sense of what your life could be like, and that might help you decide whether you want to move there on a, you know, full-time basis.
Yeah, and even without an agent, I mean, you can still find work on your own, especially if you're non-union. So, I mean, during that 3 months, you would definitely be able to get your feet wet to see what it's like in New York. And yeah, you never know, you know, about moving to the city, because my entire life, you know, I lived in New Jersey and said I would never, ever, ever live in New York, and now I'm living in New York. So, yeah, plans change.
Fantastic. Guys, let's get to about 2 more questions that I think we can wrap up for today. And if we didn't get to your question, again, just head over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/howtomodel, and you can ask your questions there. There's a thriving community, and Aaron's always on there as well, answering anybody's question that has any. This is from Erica, who lives in South Africa. She says, I'm going to school this fall in New York. I'd like to find representation while I'm there on a student visa. And the question's about agents. With so many agents in New York, how do I know which is a good agent?
Well, I just want to jump in there for 1 second, kind of quickly, and let me preface this by saying, like, I don't know the laws at all, but something you might want to check into very carefully is if you're going to New York on a student visa, I'm not sure that you can actually get paid acting jobs or modeling jobs for that matter. I think, and once again, you'd have to check this out. I think that you would need a different kind of visa in order to work. Now, you might be able to do student films where you're not getting paid, but I don't think, and once again, I don't think that you can actually get paid gigs if you're in the States on a student visa. I think that it's a very different kind of law for that. But still, to kind of answer your question, there are many ways of trying to find agents. Certainly, at whatever school you're going to be at, assuming that it's a conservatory, I mean, you're going to know about all the agents in the area. There's also a booklet called the Call Sheet, which is I think it comes out twice. Ron, do you know, is it twice a month?
Every other month, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
it's
it comes out
every other month.
Yeah.
Every other month. And what you can do is you can just buy one copy, and I think that is also through Backstage. Do they publish it?
Backstage shows it now.
And basically, they list every New York agent, casting director, manager. They talk about what projects are being cast. So you don't even have to subscribe to it. You can just, purchase one copy, and you'll get a listing of all these agents. And they also have a description of what types of talent they represent. Do they represent actors, writers, directors, models, children? So anyhow, you can really find that out very, very carefully. Also on my website, howtomodel.com. Certainly it's nowhere near as extensive, but I do list hundreds of agents there as well. But I would, get a copy of the Call Sheet and just go through the listing and see if there is an agent who represents people in the category that you want to be working in, and then go to the agent's website and look into it. But I would definitely check into the whole status thing of a student visa just to see if you can actually get paid jobs, because my guess is that you can't. So in that sense, I would really concentrate on student films or other kinds of projects that don't involve exchange of money for services.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Aaron's right. As a student, you would not be able to work paying jobs outside of the school. Definitely, I'm pretty sure that's a different visa, because now you're talking about a work visa. That's not to say you can't get one while you are a student, but I would check with your school that you're going to in New York, because they're the ones that will definitely have all that information. But let's say that you can work and you're still looking for an agent. As far as which ones are good and which ones aren't, use your gut. You never really know until you either ask another actor, hey, what do you think of this agent? And if they say, oh, well, I've never heard of them, then, obviously you have to do more research, but they may say, oh, yeah, I've heard of them. My friend works with them. They're great. Fantastic. Use Google. Put in the agent's name and put scam after it. If anything comes up, then I would be wary about meeting with that agent. If you take a meeting with an agent and they say that, okay, you need to take our classes and use our headshot photographer, absolutely a scam. Because I assume you're non-union. So on the non-union side, your agent can pretty much say and do anything they want, and there's no regulations. So you have to be careful with that. This industry standard is a 20% commission for non-union work, and usually they don't charge fees. Now, there are some that charge a web admin fee, which I guess offsets the cost of their data storage for their web server, or the web server costs or whatnot, which it's up to you whether or not that's acceptable. Like when I was getting started, I was fine with paying up to $75 for these web fees. Anything more than that, I didn't think was necessary. So if an agent asked for $200, $300 for their web admin fee, I wouldn't work with them. That was my own personal choice. I know plenty of people that did work with those agents, and they got plenty of work. But me, I just wasn't willing to do it. So yeah, they shouldn't charge you fees. If they do, I would think twice about working with them. But it's really just your gut. Most of the time, if you're not signing with agents, you can leave them anytime you want. So if you work with them for 3 months and you don't like them, you can just send them an email or a letter saying thank you for your services, but we no longer are working together or something like that. But it's more along the lines of just trusting your gut.
And I was just going to add, I can tell you in the modeling world, some of the agents do charge more than that to be on their website, and it can be $150 a year, it could be $175 a year. And the other thing too is, as far as the agencies and classes and headshot photographers, I mean, agents that have signed contracts with the union, they're called signatory agents, they are not allowed to have classes. The union doesn't allow it because they're concerned about a conflict of interest, like, oh, you want me to represent you? Well, you have to take my classes. But there are tons of non-union agencies that do offer classes. And, it's a tricky thing. There are plenty of agents, non-union, agents who will say, look, I want to represent you. I think you've got a great look. You need to study. I mean, you've got to be better than where you're at right now. And we do offer classes. And that's one thing. And if they're offering it, and as long as they're not demanding it, and I think that's fine. And there are also some agents who will bring in photographers, especially in smaller markets, and they'll bring in great photographers, and they offer the service. If you would like to get some commercial shots or a new headshot, you can do that. And personally, I mean, I think that's great. I think it can be very helpful. But it is another thing, like Ron said, if they say to you, we will only represent you if you shoot with our photographer, and we will only represent you if you take our classes, because ultimately, look, you are representing the agent when you're out there, so you've got to be good because they don't want to look bad. But you do have to be careful. And then as far as checking out scams, and one thing that you do have to be very careful of, unfortunately, in today's world, it's very easy for one person to be upset, at an agent for who knows what reason, and to write these horrible things. And it goes into the Better Business Bureau, or they have these scam alerts and stuff, and they're calling them scam. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a scam. It could be one very disgruntled person. So definitely check out those kinds of sites and see if there have been complaints. But you know what? Even the best businesses in the world might have people who are upset and write horrible things about them. So definitely check them out. But you also have to be able to read between the lines. And if you get one or two disgruntled people who are writing bad things, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a very good agency. And maybe you've just got somebody who's upset. So, but like Ron said, and I agree with this 100%. Go with your intuition, go with your gut reaction, and if there's something that doesn't feel right, trust it. And it's like trying to find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Sometimes they're hard to find, and use your gut with that one as well. And but you'll find somebody. It just takes a little bit of time and research, and you'll find somebody who's right for you.
All right.
So Joel, you said we have one more question?
Yeah, I just wanted to squeeze one more in if we can, and then after that, Aaron, if you just wrap us up for the day. This is from Tess in Jacksonville, Florida, and this is actually a really good question to kind of close out because it's talking about unions. She asks, do you recommend getting a union card prior to moving to New York, or should I wait until I get there first?
Ron, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. Okay, I teach a marketing for actors class where I address this topic, and I'm very strenuous in my opinion on this, that you should not join the union until you're either forced to or you absolutely think that you are ready for it. But I say to get eligible to join the union as soon as you can, because you can be eligible for your entire life and never join the union. I know many people who only do non-union work, but they are eligible to join the union. They just don't want to. It's their own choice. That's perfectly fine. Do you have to? No. If you don't have many credits on your resume, it's going to hurt you. When I joined the union, let me back that up. Before I joined the union, I was probably going on 4 or 5 auditions a week. When I joined the union, I started going on 1 audition a month, maybe 2, because there's so many fewer jobs, and you really need to have people know who you are before you're going to get into those audition rooms, because they've been dealing with people many years. They already know who they like and who they know is going to give a good audition, because their jobs are on the line if they bring in people who aren't going to give good auditions. So should you? I don't think so. If you're eligible to join the union right now, that's great. That's fantastic. Wait until you get here. Wait until you're ready. Maybe do some non-union jobs just to get your name out there, get some New York experience, build up your New York credits. And then when you think you're ready and you're constantly booking all of your non-union work, then maybe it's time to join the union. Or maybe you book a union job. They say, oh, you're not union? Oh, well, wait a minute. I can go to the union office tomorrow, pay my money, and I am going to be a union actor because you're eligible. So I would say don't join unless you're forced to, or you really think that you're ready to. Because if you join before you're ready and you move up to New York, it's going to hurt you. Because I know somebody who joined the union right before the unions merged. Then the unions merged, and since then he hasn't gotten a single audition because the only thing he had on his resume were 2 speaking roles and a bunch of backgrounds. He really needed a lot more experience on the non-union side before he joined the union. So now he's thinking about leaving the union to get that experience, in which case when he comes back, he has to pay the $3,000 again. So the short answer to your question, no, I don't think you need to join the union before you get up here. Just if you're eligible, that's great. Keep that eligibility until you're ready to. Aaron?
Yeah, and look, it's an individualized kind of question. There is no, yes or no or right or wrong answer for that, and it does depend on your experience. If you really haven't had that much experience, and I'm a union member. I'm vested in the union, so I've been doing this for a long time. And I get a I will get a pension and things like that. But the thing is, if you're not ready to join the union, you don't want to jump into it because, and just like we were talking about earlier, you want to get as much experience as you can. And unfortunately for me, there's a lot more non-union work available. So if you're, in Jacksonville and there is not much union work there, which I wouldn't think that there would be, I would say continue to do as much non-union work as you possibly can. Now, if you're somebody who's lived in another market and you've had a lot of experience and you are ready to be, auditioning for, major projects, you want to find an agent that is going to be submitting you, for those kinds of projects, then, in that sense, it could be helpful to you to walk into an agent's office saying that I'm a union member. It just might give you a little bit more credibility there. And I certainly understand what Ron is saying is that, and just so you guys know, when you're talking about being eligible, and there are different ways that you can become eligible, but basically you've done enough work where the next time you do a union job, you have to pay because then you will have to join, at that point. So, it really depends on where you're at, what kind of experiences you've had, and if you are actually ready to start auditioning for the bigger projects, and that's the kind of representation you want, then that will be a determining factor for you. But certainly it would be easier to get a lot of experience with non-union work. So it's going to be your call, and it depends on what you want to be doing and at what level you are currently at. But yeah, Joel, you're right. That is a very good question. Hey, and just to kind of wind things up for today, I want to make sure I give you Ron's website address again, and it's marketingforactors.com, and you can reach Ron there, whether it's to find out more about his book or his coaching sessions. And Ron, I just wanted to thank you so much for spending the time today and sharing information about your experiences and how to best break into New York, whether it's for acting or for modeling. It's going to be pretty much the same process. And I think what's also really great about what you're able to do today is you kind of take the cover off of all these hidden things that people just don't know about, and you're able to really very clearly explain, these are the steps that you want to take in order to give yourself your best chance for success. So I just wanted to thank you very much. And for anybody who has questions, after today, you can always go to the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/how-to-model. And I always, get back to people as soon as I possibly can. And anyhow, it was a great day. Look forward to talking with you all soon. Joel, I didn't know if you had any final things that you needed to say before we get done.
I just wanted to say thank you for having me. I'm always glad to help out my fellow actor, and I was glad I was able to do it through you, Aaron.
Thank you very much. And Joel, was there anything you
Yeah,
needed
I
to
was gonna
say as
say,
well?
just thanks, Aaron and Ron, again for being on today and really walking us through this process of getting work and working in New York as an actor or model. If you are listening live, the recording is going to be posted in a few days. Just watch your email for that. If you do have more questions, again, Aaron mentioned it, and please head over to facebook.com/how to model. We are building an entire community of actors and models, agents, casting directors, coaches, a ton of people that are in this industry that can help you get moving along in your career, further your career, get started wherever you are. It's a great resource, and Aaron's on there all the time answering questions from people as well. And as well, Aaron's website, howtomodel.com, has amazing resources and information. You can find out a list of coming workshops, whether they're live workshops or online workshops. And finally, I just want to mention one of the things that Aaron and Ron have been saying in the answers to a lot of questions today is it really depends on what you want to do in this industry, the answer. And so I know Aaron offers one-on-one coaching, which tailors the answers specifically to your career. If you're interested in working with Aaron one-on-one, he can set up an hour or 2 hour session with you. He has a few spots open up each month. The best way to do that is to email him, aaron@howtomodel.com, and just put in the subject line one-on-one coaching or private coaching. And he can reach out to you and talk to you a little bit more about setting up a time to talk with him over Skype or the phone or some other service to where you can have answers tailored to what you want to do in the industry, to your specific career. So I just want to encourage you to do that as well. Thanks again, guys, and I can't wait till the next workshop, Aaron. Once again, this is Joel Mark Witt, the producer for this workshop, Actor and Model's Guide to Living and Working in New York City. We'll talk to everybody really soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.